In today's episode, Stasia asks, in Google Analytics 4, how do you configure demographic data for LGBTQ plus friendly things like non-binary genders? You can't, unfortunately. And here's why. The demographic data that is in Google Analytics 4, and Google Analytics 3 for that matter, comes from Google's DoubleClick network. The tracking data comes from DoubleClick's essentially user demographics. And the ad tech world is a little behind in terms of supporting things like non-binary genders, which is fine if you identify as either cis or trans, male or female. You get bucketed in the correct categories. For anybody who doesn't fit in those two buckets, there is no accommodation for it, which means that because it's not in the ad tech side of things, it's not in Google Analytics 4. And until it becomes available on the ad tech side of the house, it will not be available in Google Analytics 4. So given that, how do you accommodate for this? Well, the easiest way to do that is to collect information directly from your visitors, from your users. If you have the ability for someone to log in and fill out a profile, then you can ask obviously things like age and gender and whatever other identifying characteristics that you want, and that will be tied to their login. Now, will that be the same amount of coverage that you get out of, say, Google Analytics for the default? No, absolutely not. It's not the same amount of coverage. But at the same time, if you've done a good job of building a relationship and establishing and strengthening that relationship with your users, you may get more information out of them than Google can out of its other users, because the way it pulls together that third-party data is from all of the other sites in the DoubleClick network and the data that's available to them. So if somebody's on, I don't know, CNN, and CNN has some demographic data available, it's only as good as the trust in the audience that you get from the people who visit CNN or Fox News or whatever web properties that are enrolled in the DoubleClick for Publishers program. That's the data that goes into DoubleClick. Could Google implement, for example, multiple genders? Yes, they could. But the question then would be, how good would that data be? Because Google itself does not generate that data. It pulls it from all of the individual publishers. So if you're on Sports Illustrated or ESPN, and if ESPN is not gathering that data and is not accommodated for non-binary genders, then the data simply won't be there. And even if it is, again, depending on the level of trust that organization has with its audience, the data may or may not be may not be reliable. So your best bet is to do the profiling yourself. Ask people when they log in, when they sign up for your newsletter, when they subscribe to your podcast. That's the time to ask for that information. And then what you'd want to do is start building models based on that. If gender is, you think, a critically important factor for things like lead quality for your organization, if you think that it matters, you'd want to establish that. So you'd build a way to gather that data for identified records. Then you'd say, okay, here's our business outcome, like purchases or whatever. And then you have all the data that you have about your leads, including gender, and you would run it through some kind of multiple regression analysis to say, does gender have any identifiable impact on the outcome? For example, are people who identify as non-binary, likely to purchase more or more often than people who identify as traditionally male or female? If it turns out that gender is not a contributing factor, then you can safely, A, ignore it going forward. B, you might want to stop collecting it because it is personally identifiable information, which is radioactive. And C, you won't have to worry terribly much about the data you get in Google Analytics 4 because you've established that gender, in this example, is not a driver of the outcomes that you care about. So that's how I would recommend doing the workaround, knowing that you're probably not going to get non-binary genders in ad tech data anytime soon. Again, it's reliant on the publishers, and the publishers, they're pretty far behind the times too. So really good question. Hope this was helpful.